Fantastic, great. So you should all be able to see a screen which says who we are. And I thought I'd start today's session a little bit differently and give you a little bit of a background to who I am. As some of you might have already picked up on from my accent, no, I'm not from Australia or New Zealand, but in fact the sunny South Africa, and was lucky enough to have grown up within the coastal region of Cape Town. Now, growing up in a home where my father has a background in mechanical engineering, my mother background in fine arts, I was always fascinated by how things worked and how they were designed. So I was always taking apart anything I could get my hands on. And much to the dismay of my mother, that often ended up being the latest appliance or product that she had purchased, and would often come home and find that scattered across the dining room table in as many parts as it was made up from. So it certainly tested my ability and understanding of how things work to ensure that I could put it together to A, make it work again, and B, make sure that it didn't burn the house down. Now, this fascination followed me throughout my life, and I found myself, after leaving school, deciding to study industrial and product design. Years after that, got a bit of experience within several design agencies and manufacturing concerns, until the year of 2014, when I decided to start my own design agency with two other business partners. And I'd always believed that design has an effect on ourselves, on how we interact with each other, the environments that we are within. And that led us to create a belief statement within the business, which said, when we engage in unique and unconventional environments, great things can happen. And this is something I still believe in today. And in 2018, I made the decision to relocate to the UK with my young family, and shortly thereafter took up an appointment within CBS as their technical consultant. Now, this fascination with how things work still, was with me. And part of the recruitment process for the business was you were given a product, told to go home, create a presentation, and come back the following day to actually sell it back to the team. So what did I do? Well, previous day, I decided to take that product apart, see exactly how it worked, get a better understanding of the quality and of exactly all the internal mechanisms, which it is something which I'd always done and certainly allowed me to understand the quality and the design that had gone into it. And this is something that really sort of attracted me to the business. And it's something which, the business was started on those core values. In the late 80s, early 90s, the three founding members, Martin Colebrook, Peter Boston, and Brenda Saunders, were all looking at how individuals of their day were working within their environments. They were trying to understand, what their requirements were, what the problems they were experiencing. And you can imagine that the technology of that day was far different to what we know as today. These giant big CRT screens, huge keyboards and towers that took up the majority of your desking surface. So there were a lot of problems with how people were actually working with the technology, and they came up with solutions to try and obviously create that best fit environment, ensure that individuals were working in the most healthy manner and not being sort of hindered in any way by this technology that they were using. So what we're looking at today is, this new age of healthy working. Now, there's a lot of debate and ideas coming through with these different spaces that we're going to be occupying. What we've done is we've broken up this session into three different components. We're looking at pre-pandemic, pandemic, and then life after COVID. And one thing that certainly always sat with me right from the beginning of my studies of industrial design was, there's nothing new under the sun. And that's exactly the same sort of thing today. A lot of these different ideas are not new ideas. They're ideas that we've been sort of exposed to and have experienced in some way, shape, or form in the past. We know, looking at a pre-pandemic environment, there was already a bit of a shift of how and where we were working. I know within my own sort of work week, work from home was an element I had adopted. One day a week, I always made sure that I had sat down and used that time to almost do a bit of a roundup of my work week to enable me to do all the sort of admin work that I needed to do and break away from the office and have that more focused type of environment. And part of our working week that we were all exposed to pre-pandemic was the element of commuting. I know when I first came to the UK, I made the fatal error of going down and trying to get onto the Central Line during peak hour, which, for those of you who are not aware, Central Line is part of the underground system, and probably one of the most congested services that's the system actually comprises of. And I wasn't familiar with this, had gone down to the platform. Yeah, there was quite a fair amount of people on the platform at that time. The train came along, doors opened up, and I looked inside and thought to myself, wow, couldn't fit another sausage inside there. But believe it or not, people next to me all started hustling and bustling, finding any spot they could to squeeze themselves into, which when you look at today, you wouldn't dare of doing that sort of thing after the year that we've just gone through. But it really sort of highlighted the fact that just the amount of people that were commuting in and out of different areas and commuting into the cities on a day-to-day basis. And this was the same thing across the globe. There was a huge demand on the infrastructure and the services. And this was obviously, there was a huge component of time as well that we sacrificed throughout our working day towards commuting, to and from our working environment. And we look at our pre-pandemic settings, our office environments. These were spaces that had been designed for specific activities. They had been equipped with the best furniture that businesses could afford, but we were still experiencing problems. It wasn't, a perfect science. There was still a rise on musculoskeletal disorders and issues that people were experiencing. And something which became quite sort of prevalent within the conversations that I was having with clients was more the fact of educating individuals on how to actually use that equipment correctly. Often, people are quite nervous or scared to actually ask questions. They start a new company, they get given a certain space, get told, this is your working desk, this is your equipment, here's your laptop computer or whatever the case may be. And that is how it gets set up from day one. And often people don't question anything. They just continue to work in that manner and don't move things around to best suit them, but rather just, work as best as they can with what they've been given. And then the pandemic hit. And this was something which none of us could see coming. It's still frightening how in the early days there was so much vagueness around the actual virus. There were a lot of individuals and global leaders, undermining the true sort of effect of it. Almost underestimating how serious the virus was. And I think that was something which I suppose a lot of us looked at it and thought, well, fine, this is something we've got to react to quite quickly. But we may be working from home for maybe 2 to 3 months, but it's nothing long term. So, this is fantastic. And it was a bit of a novelty initially. But the huge impact that we saw straight off the bat was the fact that we had been going from environments where we were moving around, we were actually sort of walking to and from train stations or however we were actually commuting to our offices, and having to be forced into an environment where now our commuting was moving from the bedroom either to the lounge or the kitchen. So the amount of steps that we were actually getting in was far less, and the amount of movement we were getting was far less. So you look at these images that we've got on the slide here, and a lot of us can relate to these types of environments. Depending on people's different situational circumstances, some of us fared better than others, but for the majority of us, our homes were not set up to be able to be an office. A lot of us didn't have the space to dedicate to a full desk and a proper task chair and all the other elements. So we had the sort of can-do approach. We made best do with what we had available to us. And again, a lot of us just thought to ourselves, we're only going to be in this situation for 2 to 3 months. So, it's fine. I can make do with what I have. And the longer that went on, the worse the problems became. And one of the stories I'll share with you was when a personal contact within the industry reached out to me midway through 2020. And it shared with me that them and their teams were experiencing massive problems, mainly around lower back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain. And the more frightening fact was that they said a lot of them were actually taking painkillers to try and subdue these effects. Now, this individual then contacted me again 2 weeks later and said, well, actually something far worse had happened. And they had found themselves experiencing all these issues, taking more and more painkillers to try and sort of subdue the pain that they were experiencing. And one day they went from their study out to their lounge to sit down on the couch, and they dropped something on the floor, reached down to pick it up, and found they couldn't get it back up again. They had done so much damage to their body that they actually couldn't move. It was similar to an individual within a manual labor environment that had overstressed it and caused themselves to have almost a slipped disc. And this is something, the longer we've been experiencing these different situations, and again, some of us might have had the luxury of having an actual space that we could set up an office correctly. But for most of us, we can all relate to the fact that our physical health has really been impacted and not in a good way. And then this was quite a surprising thing. I think there was a lot of fear from businesses, from a lot of managers, that if they allowed their workforce to go off and work from home or in different environments, that most of them wouldn't do anything. They would go sit themselves on the couch and watch Netflix and eat popcorn for most of the day, which was quite surprising to be actually the exact opposite. The productivity levels across the board actually increased. Again, depending on people's different situational circumstances, some of us fared better than others. We know that obviously if you had a dedicated space where you could actually break away and have a bit of a quiet zone to focus, you often fared better. If you had space actually dedicated to setting up a proper home office, you did fare better. But across the board, those levels really increased and were quite surprising. But there were elements obviously creeping through, and the longer down the line we went, the more we realized that not all activities are best suited to the work from home environments. We've always said, there's no one size fits all solution when it comes to furniture. And that's the same when it comes to our working environments and the patterns that we do. There is no one size fits all solution. It's really about identifying sort of the different activities you're going to be doing and then applying that in the different environments that actually suit that. One of the key areas, which everyone has been saying over and over again, they're really lacking, is the ability to collaborate and actually innovate and create really sort of inspiring ideas. Another element, which, this was quite sort of funny in the beginning of the pandemic, and again, depending where you were across the globe, depending on the type of weather that you were experiencing, it was slightly different. But especially within the UK, it was quite funny to watch people that you could quite clearly have seen hadn't been riding their bicycle or necessarily jogging, had pulled out their old running shoes from the back of the cupboard, dusted off their bicycles that were sitting in the back of the shed for many years, and all of a sudden were out and about. Everyone seemed to be exercising, which was a really good thing. Some individuals, as we've said, obviously with commuting, they found themselves saving a lot of time, and they then spent that time with their families. Other individuals, there was an element that people were looking at their lives again, re-looking at their goals and their focuses. There was initially a big shift and concern that everyone was going to be leaving the cities and going out to, and choosing a slower pace of life out in the countryside. Again, the longer we've gone down this route, the more we've realized that it's different for every individual, and most of us have really sort of waited until we've seen how the cards all fall to really make those big decisions that could impact us quite hugely. But the one big thing was the amount of cost saving that we had. I think everyone can sort of agree on the fact that was one of the good things that came out of the pandemic. They realized how much money they were spending on commuting, and they were able to obviously save that throughout the pandemic. Then we look at life after COVID. Now, I look at this and I think to myself, it's actually something which we should be quite excited about. There's a very good saying by a Greek philosopher, Socrates: the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And we know that the office environment, the traditional sort of working life in the terms of the 9 to 5 working hours, these were very traditional structures which hadn't really changed massively over the years. And it was, in due course, it was time for a bit of a change, time for a bit of a shake-up. A lot of people that I speak to, the one thing that they sort of say is that the pandemic was a bit of an accelerator for change, and change that was actually needed. There's some very interesting sort of things being done. And even as recently as yesterday, I read an article that this 4-day work week has been re-looked at, and Spain has been one of the most recent countries to be added onto the list where they'll be trialing that out. So it's very interesting that this whole idea of flexibility and variety is not only relevant to our environments, but also in terms of the structure of our day and our week and when we decide to actually work. Then another element was, the need for businesses to better understand the needs of their business and the individuals that make up those businesses. I think in the past there was always the mindset that individuals would look at other companies, at what works best for them, and then try and duplicate that to see if they could actually get that same benefit. Which we know, again, that same methodology of one size fits all. What works for one business doesn't necessarily work for another. But there's one element which we know we really have to focus on within all these new spaces that are coming through, all of them extremely relevant in their own rights, is the need to focus more on our own physical health and well-being. And in the past, I'd always known, the link between our physical health and our mental health, but had only really sort of understood it for myself when I really experienced it. I think it's something which we initially were a bit more fearful of speaking about, but the longer that we experienced this work from home pandemic and the lockdown where we weren't socializing with one another, it really started to take its toll. I know for myself, I never struggled with any sort of mental health issues, but really sort of started to feel the fact that when my physical health started to go deteriorate, that my mental health started to take a bit of a knock as well. So there's a real need to really understand and focus on our physical health and mental health going forward to ensure that we're not going to prolong these experiences that we've been thrust into. And we look at the flexibility and variety. And this is something, like I said, it's not just within the spaces that we're going to be occupying. I think the greater understanding now is that we've been able to sort of test case the work from home mindset. A lot of businesses in the past had said, they would never really adopt that in their sort of working environments, have said, well, fine, we've actually agreed that it can work. But there's now a better understanding to actually give the control over to the employees, to allow them to actually structure their work weeks and choose when and where they'll actually work to ensure that they will be more productive. I know for myself, in the past, I'd always found that I worked a lot better and could focus a lot more later in the day and even later into the evenings. Whereas a lot of my colleagues, for them, the best focus time that they had was first thing in the morning. So having that understanding of what works best for yourself and a better understanding of what's required of you, so you can select and choose those spaces that are going to get the best productivity and results out of you is going to be key going forward. I use a saying here from Gensler, a workplace survey that was conducted in 2019, looking at offering variety and freedom to work wherever and whenever resulted in the most effective results. Excuse me. It allowed individuals to be as innovative and productive as possible. So that needs to actually understand exactly what's required of us, but then also to ensure that we are working in such a way that ensuring that in these different environments, we are moving as much as possible. And this is something that's quite interesting. I think one of the elements of the pandemic that a lot of us really maybe not aren't highlighting and talking about as much is portable tech. Now, laptop technology was on the rise before the pandemic. We spoke about how that was an element which was slowly being transferred. But when the pandemic hit, there was the huge need to obviously react very, very quickly. I know within our own business, the majority of individuals obviously had been set up with laptop technologies to enable them to work remotely from where they were. But there were still individuals, the likes of our design departments, where they were still using traditional desktop computers. So there was a need for businesses to react very, very quickly and actually equip all their staff with as much portable tech as possible to ensure that they could work from wherever they needed to work from. Something which we focused internally as a business on quite a lot in the last year or so is the aspect of plug and play. We know that within these new spaces that we're going to be adopting, there's not going to be as much of an offering for the entire workforce to actually come into the space. There's going to be, depending on who you speak to and depending on the business's needs, a lot of individuals and companies looking at offering almost between a 20 to 40% sort of mix, where they will have a more of a hot desking environment, which means that those spaces need to work even harder than they ever did before. Those spaces need to be equipped with as much flexible technology as possible to allow individuals to come drop in and out of these spaces. I think one of the conversations that I had recently, which was quite interesting, was the fact that people are no longer going to look to come into a certain space and try and work the entire day within that space. They will look and say, well, fantastic, I need to actually collaborate with my team for the afternoon. I'm going to drop into a certain space, work just in the afternoon from that space, but in the morning, I'll work from home. So within these spaces, there's a need to be able to interact and go through those spaces as seamlessly as possible. So the need to actually just drop in, plug and play, very quickly set up without having to call IT and spend half an hour to an hour to actually get everything set up that you need to get to be able to do your work. There's some really interesting things being done with web-enabled devices and apps. A lot of furniture companies where they've integrated app technology within your smartphone to control your furniture. Some really interesting things being done around how that relates into access into buildings, and allows you to even call lifts without having to touch anything and engage only on your smartphone itself. And I think one of the areas that's really quite interesting and probably will see the most amount of change going forward is this element of augmented and virtual reality. Now, we know within these environments that I'm now speaking to you on, video conferencing has been something we've had to adopt in our daily lives, and something which is not going to be going away. We know within these new spaces, not all of us will be in that same space at the same time. So there will still be a need to collaborate and work with other teams across the globe. But we know that the virtual experience at the moment is lacking. And I think this is something where we're really going to see a lot of developments. I've seen some things being done, which are quite interesting, using virtual reality to actually allow individuals to feel more engaged and almost feel encapsulated within the environment so that it doesn't seem so two-dimensional. And if we look at understanding needs, I think this is really one of the most important things. As I've said before, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And businesses really need to understand what's required or what they're expecting their employees to do, and the types of tools and environments that are going to be best suited to allow them to work as productively as possible, but also in a healthy manner. You know, that element of purpose design, making sure that every single space is on point and has been designed with a very specific intent, not to necessarily take copy paste from what works for other businesses, and really to allow the office space to become more of an experience space. I think going forward, you know, there's a lot of interesting different strategies being applied, and I think there's going to be a time at which a lot of businesses will be testing things. They'll be seeing what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and adjusting and evolving, and almost allowing their business to be flexible in the way that they'll start to actually approach these different spaces going forward. Now, something which was quite sort of alarming is obviously the issues we've been seeing with our physical health and well-being. You know, the World Health Organization had already identified that there was a problem. Our inactivity levels were rising year on year, and this was a study that they had conducted in the end of 2018, and they had already applied a strategy going forward to try and reduce these effects. They now obviously know that from the pandemic, this has been drastically affected. And there's even greater need to ensure that we are moving around as much as possible. We know, you know, all of us are probably very mindful of the fact that we all have become a lot more sedentary. We're not moving around as much. We all have been experiencing these negative health issues. And if we don't really become more aware of how we use these different spaces and ensure that we're keeping our own health at the front of our mind, these problems will continue to go on and on and on. So how we work with our tech, how we work with these spaces is going to be extremely important to ensure that we're not having these problems creeping through and continuing for as long as they actually have been. So some of the key takeaways that I really want you guys to sort of take home with you is the aspect of movement. You know, we know that you know, within our future office design, within our traditional office design, there's always a lot more control about how we use the space. Things have been designed in a certain way to create certain flows, and also make sure that we're moving as much as possible. You know, we're all human beings. We're creatures of habit. You know, bad habits are something which, you know, creep through very, very quickly. You know, if the last year is anything to look at, that's just proof of how quickly the effects of those bad habits can actually have on us. So it's almost about rethinking, you know, reinventing the wheel in a way, and thinking about trying to create these routines and create good habits. To ensure that we're working within a healthy manner within all these different exciting environments that we're going to be working within. And then looking, obviously, you know, we all know technology is something which we'll never get away from. It's something which we use on a day-to-day basis with every aspect of our life. We wake up in the morning, a lot of us, the first thing we do is we interact on our phones. The very next thing we're doing is jumping onto our laptop computers. When we get home at night, we're jumping onto the TV. So we're always engaging with these different technological platforms. But we really need to ensure that when we're doing these things, we are working in the most healthy manner that we can actually do. So adjusting our technology all the time to best suit ourselves. We always see that a lot of individuals, as I said before, you know, you'll work in a certain environment, you'll be given a set of equipment or tools, and you'll just work according to how it's initially set up. You know, a lot of the furniture that we design, we need to move it. You know, it's designed to move to best suit us, not the other way around. So again, really ensure move those things around as much as possible, and then understanding the needs of businesses. And I think this is something which a lot of companies I know within our own group, this is something we've been doing quite a lot, and most businesses are taking this time to better understand not only their individuals' life scenarios, but also what is really beneficial to them, what they really need to ensure that going forward that they can work in the best way possible. So thank you guys very, very much for joining that. I'm sure there's some questions that are already in the chat box. I'd like to sort of refer back to Oliver to find out what those all are. And if you guys haven't asked any questions, please do sort of jump those into the chat box now, and we can sort of go over those.
Thank you very much for that, Luke. That was really, really interesting, buddy. Really appreciate you taking the time to share that content with us. We had a few teething problems with the WebEx chat box. So apologies to you, Luke, and everyone else that was trying to write questions, although there is still time to pop them into the chat box or the Q&A box now. They won't go to everybody, but they will come to the panelists, and we'll be able to read those out on your behalf. If you have any questions, please post them now. We'd love to hear from you. So in the meantime, while people get a little bit busy with their fingers, writing some questions to us, Luke, I mean, a lot of that really resonated with me. When lockdown happened in Dubai, I was on paternity leave, and believe it or not, I didn't have a lick of ergonomic furniture at home. And I didn't have the opportunity to nip into the office and grab some stuff, as many employees and companies have done during the lockdown. So for that 4 to 6 month period, I can definitely relate to the back issues, sciatica, which I'm still experiencing now from working in a really poor environment, actually from a standing height dining table, which you think would be great because sitting is the new smoking, right? Well, it turns out standing is also equally as bad for you. So I had a lot of issues during that 4 to 6 months, many of which I'm trying to recuperate from now. So have you got any kind of tips or advice? Obviously, we know that like an ergonomic chair is really important, but things like, to support the neck, where should the monitor be? How do we use monitor arms, that sort of stuff? Any recommendations that you could do to help people set up their home ergonomic solutions using things like monitor arms or laptop jacks or stuff like that? What are the guidelines?
Yeah, of course. I think the main thing, obviously, like you said, within our home environments, we're not all in the best situation where we actually have a dedicated space that we can fit, a traditional desk in. But there's a lot of equipment and tools out there to allow us to actually reposition things and move around as much as possible. So obviously, with the best thing is to have a setup where you can have a separate desk. Sit stand would be the absolute best to allow you to then change that way of working throughout your day. I think something which I did right from the early days was to ensure that I was actually changing my position as much as possible. So if I find myself sitting at the dining room table, trying to remind myself every hour or so to actually get up and then go across to the kitchen counter and then stand for a few hours and then go back and return back to seated position. I think that's one of the main things, really, to ensure you're moving around as much as possible, but then using equipment, and it doesn't have to be the most expensive that you can find, but simple portable tools that can allow you to actually elevate your screens a little bit better. I think something that is quite interesting is the fact that it's not rocket science. It's the basics. It's all about balance. And when you use something as simple as a monitor arm and you raise your screen, naturally it'll actually promote you to sit in a more balanced way, and it'll better your posture, just because of the fact that you're not sort of hunched over and staring down at your screen. I think that's probably one of the worst things. I always see individuals doing it even when they're sitting in a coffee shop environment. And again, you convince yourself, I'll only be here for an half an hour. But 9 times out of 10, you end up sitting there for the best part of 2-3 hours, and you've been hunched over your screen, and all that weight of your head is sitting, having to be supported by your neck and shoulder muscles, which again will start to creep through and cause problems more often than not. So yeah, very, very concerning.
Yeah, it's that kind of de-evolution of man image that we've seen, where people are just kind of hunched over on their keyboard. So as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, The rough guidelines are that you want your screen about arm's distance away from you, and the black or whatever color bar at the top of your screen, you want that kind of at eye level so that you're in the correct posture, whether you're seated or standing. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly correct. And we often also use the 20-20-20 rule as well, because a lot of people say to us, looking at all these screens, does it actually affect your eyesight? Now, a lot of us, can agree, with the amount of exposed time that we actually spend looking at these devices. You do find your eyes getting tired. At the end of the day, your eyes are muscles. So when they're being strained the entire time, they do, like any other muscle, become tired. So we often say, take a 20-second break every 20 minutes and look at something 20 feet away. And that's something which it's fairly simple and fairly basic to do. But again, it's just about getting yourself into a bit of a routine and reminding yourself to do it. Yeah. Another thing as well with the positioning on the screen, a lot of people, we always tell people to tilt the screen to about a 15-degree angle. And a lot of people think to themselves, is this for glare? But it actually is to replicate the natural droop that we have in our eyelids. It's a more comfortable viewing angle. I know a lot of people, been speaking to a lot of people utilizing curved screens as well. And large format screens where traditionally you can't have the positioning of that screen set at eye level height. So a lot of them actually end up positioning it slightly higher up. But we always say, it's far better to be sitting slightly higher up than further down, because again, it promotes you to sit in that better posture and don't have that strain of your head sitting over your shoulders.
Oliver, can I just check you've seen all the questions I've sent to you? There's loads of questions I've sent to you.
I can see lots of questions coming through from Anthony, Samantha. I've seen a couple that you've posted, Mark, as well.
Yeah, okay, as long as you can see them. I just wanted to check, thanks.
I can indeed see them, yeah. So yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know that, Luke. I actually have a curved screen, so I'm going to be adjusting the angle to that 15 degrees that you recommended there. Because I do kind of get like a blur when I'm scrolling through sometimes, so that's probably one of the reasons why. Right, okay, so let's jump into some of the questions. So this one's from Samantha Allen. She says, what are some of the seminal research articles around the importance of movement that we could use to help clients understand or maybe influence clients?
Yeah, I think the whole aspect of movement, it's something which, like I say, we've obviously seen a huge decrease in the amount of step count that people are traditionally doing. I think it was very easy within the past while, there was everyone utilizing the Apple Watch, the Fitbits, and it was quite easy even within my working week. Getting 10,000 steps was really easy. Most of the time it would be a lot more, up to 18,000 steps. There's a lot of studies being done at the moment. I think that the frightening thing that a lot of people are looking at, we know that obviously the prolonged time that we either sit or stand has an effect, and they're associating it to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or type 2 diabetes at least, and also looking at how the link between certain types of cancers can be associated with this sort of sedentary lifestyle. So I think there's certainly a lot more exploration being done at the moment, and it's probably fairly early days. I mean, I say to a lot of people that this last year, I don't think we've seen the true effect of what all this sort of sedentary lifestyle has actually done to us. The lack of movement, this prolonged exposure to this repetitive type of damage that we're doing to ourselves. The story that I shared with you, that individual, who suffered that issue has still not got over it. They had to take quite a lot of time off work, but nothing's really changed. For a lot of us, we've been going in and out of different lockdown environments, and again, a lot of us have tried to set up our work from home environments a little bit better than what we initially had. But it's not perfect. And again, we know when you're having 100% working from either the office or from home, that these types of issues creep through very, very quickly. So yeah, I mean, I would say that it's more about trying to encourage as much movement as possible, and throughout the day. I know a lot of people initially thought, well, it's fine if I'm sitting for long periods of the day. I will make sure that I'm jogging first thing in the morning, cycling in the evening, but that's not enough. I did that myself, and I was wondering for a long time, thinking, well, why isn't it working for me? Why am I still, feeling sort of back pain and neck pain throughout the day? And it's because, you're doing that damage throughout the day, and you have to take those multiple breaks in between and move throughout your working day. It's not just good enough to try and sort of make amends at the end of the day or beginning of the day.
Thank you very much for that good comprehensive answer. And I noticed on your slides there were lots of references there as well. So we will endeavour to share those in the follow-up email as well. So everyone will get access to those references that Luke included. I have a question from Damien Mears, and I'm not entirely sure if you'll be able to answer this one because I don't think it's a product that you offer, but maybe you can shed a little bit of light. If not, I'm able to give some insight on this as well. Is there any research on how to best use sit-stand workstations? Standing all day doesn't seem right.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose it would probably be more in your forte on that. I know that it was quite funny initially with sit-stand when it first came out. Obviously, it was a lot more expensive and all the rest of it. But people almost took the assumption that standing was much better than sitting, and that we would stand for the entire day. But we know that that's definitely not the case. It's about encouraging as much movement as possible. So sitting for a period of time, standing, then going back to sitting, and then standing. That constant movement. In terms of the actual percentages and how many hours per day and everything, I would probably sort of refer back to you, and I think you probably have more data on that, considering the type of equipment that Herman Miller actually manufactures.
Yeah, thank you for that, Luke. I mean, the issue around sit-stand desking is really a conscious one, and people have to remember to flip the paddle underneath their desk to go from a seated to a standing position or vice versa. And when you're locked into the digital world, it's really easy to forget about the issues that you're experiencing in your musculoskeletal system. So for many organizations, the utilization of these desks doesn't warrant the 15 to 20% price hike that is obviously required because you've got a significantly more capable product there. It's understandable that it would be more expensive. So if you look at more forward, workplace forward-thinking regions of the world, like the Nordics and specifically Australia, and Australia in particular, they've actually moved a little bit past sit-stand workstations, and now they just have fixed standing and fixed regular height seating, because being able to see it in your peripheral view is that conscious cue to maybe move from one to another, rather than that paddle that is definitely kind of out of sight and out of mind. Now, all that being said, we now have these wearable pieces of technology, which is encouraging and what would they call pushing behavior as well. So now they are starting to become more warranted, because it's not just relying on your conscious mind to promote that movement, but now your watch is telling you. It also tells me to breathe a lot as well. I thought that was honestly one of my skills, probably my only skill. So a little bit strange around that one. But thank you very much for your question, Damien. I hope we were able to answer it there to
I think to add on to that, this is quite interesting. Like you say, we've got all the wearable tech that can actually, remind us of all these things. One of the interesting things that I've seen now being integrated into it is the fact that it reminds you obviously to move. It can readjust your desk and everything for you, but it also reminds you to actually increase your fluid or your water intake as well, which is something that we know, we obviously haven't been nearly enough of. So yeah, definitely make best use of those types of devices that we have available.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so do you think employers have given sufficient support to employees for the optimal home working setup?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think, again, beginning of the pandemic, everyone believed that we would only be sitting in that situation for the best part of 2 to 3 months. And then there wouldn't be the need to actually, ensure that we set up our home as an office effectively. Again, the further down the line we've gone, there's been a lot of businesses that have reacted. The big ones that everyone watches, the likes of your Googles and your Microsofts, they reacted fairly early, and they put allowances aside to allow their employees to actually sort of purchase the correct equipment and set up their spaces, because they knew obviously they were going to be in this for quite some time, but that work from home was always going to become an element of our working environment. It was going to become part of our office environment. I think something which is there's a lot of debate and discussion being done around that, is what the duty of care and the amount of responsibility that an employer actually has. And that's probably something which we're going to see a lot of movement and change going forward. I think, like I said, traditionally with an office environment, it was very easy to control that space. You could monitor, it had been designed in a certain way, but you could also monitor how individuals were using that space. And if there were any issues, they could straight away address those. Whereas in a work from home environment, it's extremely difficult. The company they rely on the employees to tell them if they're experiencing issues. And throughout the pandemic, people were more fearful of doing so. There were a lot of redundancies across the board. The economic impact that we had across the globe was drastic. So people were more fearful of actually raising their hand and saying, well, actually, I'm not doing so well. I'm experiencing all these issues for fear of being let go. So yeah, I think going forward, there's certainly a lot more focus on it. And yeah, companies are reacting, and that they're starting to actually try and set up those individuals that they can.
Thanks, Lou. This one's from Anthony Ingram. Now, you kind of addressed this already with the 20-20-20 rule, but can you mention something about eyesight health and increased screen time viewing? And I'm going to bolt on a question of my own on there as well, because I've ordered on Amazon some of those blue glasses. Will they be effective at preventing eye strain and kind of blurry vision and dry eyes?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's something which I'm also busy looking at, because it was something which again, wasn't sort of news, but I became a lot more aware of it when I had my first son, and watching him interact with my phone, or you would grab the iPad, and the amount of sort of time where you would try and spend actually interacting with these devices really sort of led me to do a bit of research on my own and try and understand sort of what the sort of effect of it is. I mean, if we look back from my generation, I didn't have the likes of a cell phone or tablets or anything like that. I remember, when the first computer lab was integrated into our primary school, and that was a big thing, but it wasn't something that you were going to be spending all your day in front of the computer. It was only, you had a computer lesson that was only half an hour. So yeah, I mean, I know that there's a lot of studies as well being done about the blue light technology, how that affects in terms of the development of the certain components within your eye. I would say it needs to all be about balance. We need to ensure that if we are starting to experience problems, and we're starting to feel our eyes actually being overstrained, that we take regular breaks. And if we find that actually that there's more of a problem that we need to go and seek help for, go get our eyes tested, do those types of things. There's no study that can actually say that increased sort of screen time will make your eyes deteriorate. But we know with the prolonged exposure and eye strain, if we're not taking regular breaks, that strain will start to cause problems.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate you taking the time to present to us today. It's part of the In the Know series. That's a wrap. We're gonna leave it there and give you a few minutes back in your day. So thank you to all the attendees for reaching out, registering, and also attending today. Really do appreciate you all. Thank you very much, Luke. Really do appreciate your time. Have a great day, everybody. See you later.
Thanks, everyone.